Hello and welcome to Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. Now this is where we take a look inside the world of media, analysing the trends, the issues and the reporting of some of the week's top stories. I'm Peter Ndora and this is what's coming up on the show today. We'll take a look at whether or not African governments are upholding press freedom when it comes to reporting on COVID-19 and some of the challenges journalists are facing. Our international editor feature takes us to Uganda this week, and we'll be talking to an editor there. We'll be unpacking how the media there is managing to cover this novel coronavirus. In our news and history feature this week, we take you back to the year 2005, and this is when the commemoration of writer and composer of the national anthem, Nkosi Sikelel' Africa, Enoch Sontonga, had been dead for 100 years. So that's the show, but remember, you can engage with us on social media using the Twitter handle, #SABC Media Monitor, #SABC Media Monitor. Before we get into the show though, let's get into what's on the front pages of our newspapers today, and this is what they look like. Let's start with the Sunday Times, and this is the story on the front of the Sunday Times, and the lead there is about how millions of South African families face hunger as the lockdown crimps incomes. They include 1 million domestic workers, nearly 90,000 waste pickers, and 3.5 million elderly and 12 million children. The City Press's headline reads, "Food parcel looting hits the poor." Now this story details how alleged incidents of corruption and food looting have been reported in 8 provinces, where it's claimed that those in charge of the distributions were not giving the food to the families that were most in need. The Sunday Independent is leading with how the family of the man who was allegedly assaulted by members of the army in Alexandra and later died is planning to sue the government for up to 10 million rand for their loss. The Sunday Tribune is running a story about how the ban on sale of alcohol and cigarettes is denting the economy, whilst the production of illicit alcohol has been increasing. The alcohol and tobacco industries have suffered another blow on Friday when President Cyril Ramaphosa declined a request by the Gauteng Liquor Forum and its members to sell alcohol during the national lockdown. They also withdrew their threat to take the matter to court. Now, the Sunday World, they're running a story on how COVID-19 has humbled controversial Afrikaans singer Steve Hofmeyr, who often insults and spews racist remarks against the government. The paper says that Hofmeyr has crawled to the Department of Arts, Sports and Culture with a begging bowl for assistance. Okay, so that's the front pages of the print media, and that's what captured your imagination. Let's see rather what captured your imagination on social media, as a lot more people are relying on that. Let's take a look and see what the trends are for South Africa on Twitter, and yeah, quite a number. Day 24 of lockdown, #China must fall. Babyface and the China Must Fall, of course, talking about some of the sad racist videos that have been doing the rounds of social media, where black people weren't allowed into a number of shops in China. A number of other ones here, Sacred Space always there, and that's of course on Radio Metro with Taming Gubeni. But day 24 of lockdown, and what I like about the ones that you've been sending there is remembering the people on the front line, and that's our healthcare workers and the challenging environment that they're working in. And this is what you've been celebrating there with the tweets that have been playing out there. So thank you very much indeed to our healthcare workers. We really appreciate you and salute you on the front line. The best protection any woman can have is courage, and they're still not bowing down. Thanks so much indeed. And the last one is this one. Most of you have never prayed for this day, but I know you've been praying for something like this. We're in safe hands. You've got this, you've got us. Thank you very much. So thank you very much indeed to our healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, support staff right across the country for the hard work, brave work that you're doing on our behalf. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will have more for you right here on Media Monitor.
Scenes reminiscent of the 1976 uprisings in Soweto, trying to make a quick getaway at the sight of the police. But what began as funny scenes on the streets of the country's biggest township turned serious and deadly very quickly. Driver who tried to make a quick getaway has been cornered. With the car chase over and the suspect in the back of the van, more arrests were made.
We are not going to allow people who are going to challenge the authority of the state at the expense of the lives of disciplined citizens of this country.
Traders without permits having their goods confiscated.
We're not stopping people from trading, but they must do it within the confines of the law. So the most important is to tell the nation that they should stay at home so that the curve can be flattened and then this COVID-19 situation can actually end.
A disappointing end to a holy Sunday.
We were not 100% complying. We were not 1 meters away like the regulations requested.
We are observing non-compliance.
There really is no event that is exempt from the regulations.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Now, African journalists are increasingly harassed or threatened by police and security services whilst reporting the news during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is according to a number of media watchdogs and journalist associations that have been tracking the abuse of reporters globally. According to the Austria-based International Press Institute, which is tracking media freedom, 104 violations have been noted worldwide, including 24 on the African continent. Verbal and physical attacks make up the majority of the violations experienced here. We're now joined by Ravi R. Prasad, who's the Director of Advocacy at the International Press Institute, to talk to us a little bit more about this, and he's in Austria. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program. I just wonder, beginning just to sort of open up, if you could just tell us what the situation in Austria is like in terms of fighting COVID-19 and how they've managed to contain or flatten the curve so well.
Well, Austria was one of the first countries to impose a lockdown. The government here imposed a lockdown on March 16. And since then, people have not ventured out of their houses. We are allowed to go out for walks. Grocery shops and medical shops are open. But the people followed it to the letter and spirit. People didn't venture out. As a result, the curve has flattened. Number of infections every day have reduced. The government has, since last week, after Easter, they opened up smaller shops, which are 400 square meters or less. But everybody has to wear a mask when getting into a shop or getting into public transport. So things are under control, and Austria is now being cited as an example of how to flatten the curve.
All right, so compliance really can make a difference. Well, let's talk about the work that you've been monitoring. And I just wonder, has the reporting of the news changed since the outbreak of COVID-19? And if so, what have you noticed?
What we have noticed is a lot of newspapers and media outlets around the world have focused on covering COVID because it is the biggest story at the moment. There are challenges, and there are huge challenges, because we talk to our members. IPI is a 70-year-old organization. We were set up in 1950 and in Columbia University in the United States were 34 editors. And since then, we've been engaged in freedom and journalists. So we have members in 100 countries. We've been talking to them. The biggest challenge they face is how to cover this pandemic. How does a reporters feel? There are new concepts coming, like cover the field, report from home. A lot of newspapers and media outlets have allowed their reporters to work from home, but they still have to go out. Photojournalists face the biggest challenge because they have to take photos. The struggle is to get hazmat suits, personal equipment, and to stay away from hospitals. It's not easy. Second challenge is to get information. Information is hard to come by.
All right, Ravi, you know what? We're going to try and re-establish a connection with you because it's so we're struggling to keep you solid online at the moment. We'll come back to you in a short while. So as we leave Ravi and try and redial him, let's come home to South Africa, and we continue looking at some of the challenges the media are facing and dealing with. And joining us now, we have our SABC foreign editor, Sophie Mkwena, to talk us about some of the issues and how media freedom is being challenged, if at all, and also some of the things that journalists need to be aware of in covering this. Sophie, thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program. Always great having you. So COVID-19 certainly has changed the game for journalists. Apart from wearing protective clothing and trying to keep safe, have there been challenges that journalists have been facing in trying to tell the story?
Before we come to telling a story and also issues that journalists have to take care of on reporting this important international story, let's start with the challenges facing some of the journalists who are currently in prison. You know that around the world you have journalists who are in prison. For example, in countries such as Yemen, countries such as Egypt, countries such as Libya, countries such as when you look at the South Sudan, when you look at countries such as Cameroon, where you have a problem for journalists, there are concerns that those journalists who are currently in jail are likely to find themselves having this virus because it's very difficult to control the situation in prison. And therefore, the international organizations that represent journalists around the world have made a call that all those journalists who are currently in jail must be released because their lives are in danger. And then coming to how you deal with the story, it's quite difficult at times. It depends on countries. When you look at some of the countries where you have challenges of media freedom, clearly this will be a problem because some states or some other countries would want to manage the flow of information and they don't want to be exposed where they are lacking, because we knew as early as January after the outbreak that countries had to be prepared, but others didn't. And therefore it's very difficult to get information. You have to rely on the departments of health in different parts of the world where they issue numbers, but at times those numbers are questionable and it is very difficult to verify because you are dealing also with a complex matter of health, and therefore you need experts to explain. You can't just write a story or perhaps put together a story. You also have to get in touch with those who are in this sector or in this domain, and therefore you rely solely on health sectors or officials or specialists, doctors, scientists, and of course information from the communications departments of different countries. All right, let's talk about South Africa. What's been the lay of the land here? It seems as if the Department of Health here has been quite good at dealing with the media and offering information. Yes, indeed, the Minister of Health from day one, I think he took a decision to be upfront with facts, and also I think government agreed, led by the President Cyril Ramaphosa, who's the chair of the council that deals with coronavirus or COVID-19, that information must be made available at all times. It is for that reason you see many briefings from different ministers. You look at the Minister of Health, he's constantly giving us information, but also he has taken this issue further by ensuring that he engages with the broader public by using the latest technology, the Zoom, where people can link up and also ask questions, but also inviting scientists and doctors and nurses, people who are in the know-how, to explain what is happening, where we are, what we have to do. And then secondly, you have ministers that are supposed to complement the Minister of Health. For example, social development, even though there are huge challenges in terms of ensuring that you take care of the poor and the vulnerable and the delivery thus far has been questionable because people are complaining. But you also have ministers of economy, the Minister of Finance, Minister of Trade and Industry also sharing information in terms of what they are doing to try and manage a situation where the economy is facing serious challenges. You also have Minister of International Relations giving a feedback in terms of interaction with the international community, but also repatriating South Africans who are stuck outside the country. Therefore, there's synergy when you look at government. And the Minister of COGTA, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, with regulations all the time, giving feedback when there are changes, when there are issues to be communicated. Therefore, communication has been quite good. But I think we still have to do more as journalists to really make sure that the voices of ordinary people are heard.
All right, and I guess, as you were saying, you know, delivering news about statistics and so on and so forth, if you have a health department, authorities that are feeding the information, journalists also have a responsibility not to be taken in by some of the posts on social media where people keep saying, I have someone who hasn't been counted, I have someone who hasn't been counted. And the danger there, of course, is that this can distort the picture, especially where the information you're receiving from authorities is reliable.
Whatever you pick up from social media, you have to verify. I think there's nothing wrong in ordinary citizens, people who are affected, to express their views and their experiences on social media. But then you have to verify that information because, you know, to process information and stats and data, it's not an easy thing. You know, when someone passed on now in the house, you still have to call the relevant people, and those people must come and send people with expertise to check what was the reason, and before you can really declare a person having passed on based on a particular ailment or disease. And therefore it does take time, and there's nothing wrong in people coming forward with information, but it is the responsibility of journalists to verify that information. Take a phone call, call the Department of Health, call the NCD. If it's a continental matter, call the African Center for Diseases in Addis Ababa. If it's a broader, bigger issue, call the WHO, Sub-Sahara region, if it's African continent, but if it's the world, you can check with WHO. So you have these organizations and institutions that can help us to verify information so that when we report facts, not fiction.
All right. So at the beginning of the lockdown here in South Africa, I remember there was some issues with some journalists saying that perhaps the police and the army that are out there enforcing the lockdown didn't quite understand who was essential service and who was essential workers, and some journalists got caught up in that. Has that improved over time?
You still have pockets of misunderstanding, you know, between journalists and also the security establishment, because, you know, sometimes people implement the decisions in different ways. And this problem, it's not a South African problem, but it's a problem particularly on the continent. When you look at countries such as Kenya, when you look at countries such as Zimbabwe, journalists have complained that there are problems at times when they are supposed to do the work, and how at times the security establishment or security officials are using a very even-handed and, you know, strong measures to enforce or to make people to comply with the regulations that are in place in different countries. Therefore, we will continue to look at that, but you will continue to have such cases. They are there, they are happening. And as soon as those cases are brought to the attention of editors have a right to take matters with the relevant authorities, or perhaps look at organizations that represent journalists in the respective countries. In the South African context, you have SANEF, you also have TIEF on the continent, you have other international organizations that you can call, and they will indeed get in touch with the respective authorities or governments to highlight the plight of journalists.
All right, Sophie, perhaps in wrapping up, I'm just going to ask you really just to talk as a journalist more than anything else. And it's something I've been pondering for a while. And I wonder, do you think that, yes, of course, COVID-19 is the major story of the planet and the one that we must be talking about a lot. But do you think that as journalists we're getting the balance right? Because there is other news and there is a danger where we can just do COVID and nothing else.
Well, Peter, you know, when you have a big story, we tend to be consumed by that kind of a content, and everyone wants to do the story. I mean, let's make, for an example, the SABC Foreign Desk International News. Since January, we've been on this story since the second week of January, when we came back from holidays, when it was reported that there is an outbreak in China. So we've been dealing with China. From China we had to move to Europe, US, and now we are on the continent in Africa. Now, sometimes indeed the COVID-19 or coronavirus stories will dominate the news, but I think we still have to do those stories that are not related to COVID-19. Or also, when we do these COVID-19 stories, we don't just focus on numbers of people who have been infected and people who have died and people who have recovered, but also the stories behind the story, how the life of ordinary people have been impacted or affected by this outbreak of the coronavirus or the pandemic, but also looking at the governments around the world. Are they doing enough to assist ordinary people? This you can link it to service delivery, looking at the gaps of service delivery. The other issue is the economy. We know that in this story you have COVID-19, people dying, but the economy is also dying. And when the economy is dying or the economy is facing challenges, people are going to be affected post COVID-19. Therefore, you have to strike a balance in telling the COVID-19 story, but also other stories in different parts of the world that are related to ordinary people or issues that may affect different countries later on. Therefore, it is important also to look at progress made on other issues. We can't just only report on COVID-19.
All right, and that's where we leave it today, Sophie. Thanks so much indeed. Always a pleasure talking to you. That's our foreign editor, Sophie Mkwena, giving us a view of what's happening not just domestically but across the continent as well in terms of covering COVID-19, some of the challenges that journalists are facing, but also the responsibilities that we have in cooperating and working with the work of the authorities. All right, well, we carry on with this theme and we go back now to Austria, where we'll be talking to Ravi R. Prasad, who's the Director of Advocacy at the International Press Institute. And he was helping us unpack some of the challenges that they've observed for journalists across the continent in particular in trying to report the story of COVID-19. Ravi, thanks so much for joining us. I think before we lost you, you had explained quite well about the shift in the storytelling given the import of COVID-19. What I want us to do now is to take a look at what's been happening on the ground and some of the challenges that media have been facing in terms of their ability to report the story across the continent. Take us through that as we look at a graphic that we're going to put up on the screen now.
Emergency laws. They want to control the movement of people. In many countries, they have declared media as an essential service, but unfortunately, everything is policed, and some of the government officials do not understand the importance of media. What we have seen is a lot of people are getting arrested.
All right, okay, Ravi, we're going to try for the third time just now. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to try again. Austria, normally connections are quite good, but unfortunately we're struggling at this time. Stay with us.
There will be a day when COVID-19 is a thing of the past.
Until then, our president has announced a national lockdown to save lives.
Unless you're an essential worker, stay at home.
This is to protect you and others.
Stay at home, dulang haye, hlala ekhaya, play still.
Only leave home to seek medical care, go to the bank,
or to buy essential items like groceries or medicine.
You can still keep fit and healthy while at home.
But remember to take care of those who need it.
If you do need to leave home, keep your distance from other people and wash your hands regularly using soap or hand sanitizer.
Let's keep each other safe.
If you feel sick, go to your clinic, doctor or hospital. Or phone the NICD hotline on 0800 029 999.
We can beat this.
We can beat this.
Count me in.
Count me in.
Count me in.
This epidemic will pass, but it is up to us to determine how long it will last.
An absolute decimation on the whole share index.
Stock's feeling an enormous amount of pain. I think a lot of people very concerned.
We already expect the Reserve Bank to act aggressively.
Don't overpressurize them. Leave the conversation to me and the governor of the South African Reserve Bank.
Meter taxi drivers, you find them a lot when you come out from their arrivals. They say business today particularly has been very bad and they're very concerned.
Welcome back. You're watching Media Monitor. Yeah, we certainly have been having our challenges with technology, but I think we've fixed the problem now. So let's try and go back to Ravi R. Prasad, Director of Advocacy at the International Press Institute, who joins us now on the line via Skype. So Ravi, explain to us some of the things that you've observed across the continent with regards to media being able to do their job.
The biggest challenge media is facing today on the continent and around the world is the lack of understanding among some of the overzealous police officers and government officials. What's happening is journalists are getting attacked, they're getting stopped from covering. In Zimbabwe, on the African continent, the incidence of arrests and harassment of journalists is pretty high as compared to other countries in Africa. What has happened in Zimbabwe is that the Zimbabwe Media Commission has not been able to renew the accreditation of journalists. As a result, they have old accreditation cards, and police is not allowing them to function with those, in spite of the fact that the Zimbabwe Media Commission has informed the police and government authorities that they have not renewed the cards and therefore journalists should be allowed to function. Second thing that journalists are facing is when they're covering COVID-related lockdown violations, they're being attacked by people in markets, in public places, because people don't want that to be reported. And that has happened in Ghana, it's happened in Kenya, it's happened in Ethiopia. So things are unfolding as the lockdown bites in. And I read in the newspapers today that there were some riots in Johannesburg because of food shortages going to the lockdown. When these things happen and journalists go to cover that, people don't like it and they crush journalists. That's becoming a major challenge, besides the fact that on the continent, the circulation of newspapers is reducing, which is a major financial problem for a lot of newspapers.
All right, so what's your fear if this carries on? It might escalate. What's your biggest fear if this isn't dealt with?
The biggest fear we have at IPR is journalists will be exposed to all kinds of attacks, physical, verbal, and legal. Because in many cases, what we've seen is government officials have filed legal cases against journalists and media outlets for reporting facts. In many countries, in the name of fake news or preventing fake news, charges are being leveled against journalists. Governments in many authoritarian countries are using this coronavirus pandemic as a pretext to clamp down on independent media. So if this continues, independent media faces threat, existential threat, besides journalists' physical safety.
Have journalists been able to tell you why they think maybe authorities are having such a heavy hand in trying to stop them doing their work?
And that's exactly what the journalists are talking about. When there is no pandemic, when there is no emergency, the same authorities work very well with journalists. When the police officers investigate a case successfully, they want coverage of their of the case. But when it comes to crackdown during the lockdown, they are acting against journalists. So journalists have a kind of love-hate relationship with the government officials because they are also seen as somebody who exposes or who expose the corruption in the government or the misdeeds of the government officials. So this is the time when some of the government officials who have a grudge against against journalists or have an axe to grind, they use this opportunity to attack journalists. But if this situation continues, what we need is a clear direction from the government, a clear direction from the political powers that journalists are an essential service. Without journalists, we cannot communicate with the people. So please spare them, let them work, give them the independence to work.
All right, and perhaps, in fact, we've run out of time, sadly, but thanks so much indeed, Ravi, for persevering with us and the connection and sharing your thoughts with us about this important work. Thanks so much indeed for your time, and stay safe.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on the program.
Okay, that was Ravi Prasad from the International Press Institute sharing his thoughts with us about the challenges that journalists are facing across the continent. Authorities not allowing them to do their work for whatever reason, perhaps not wanting certain information to flow, but also this threat from citizens who don't want stories in their areas being told. All right, we stay on the continent, and this past Thursday, the Committee to Protect Journalists released a statement calling for the immediate release of broadcast journalist Yayeso Shimelis. The statement was in response to Ethiopian authorities' new terrorism allegations against the journalist. Police first arrested Yayeso, who hosts a weekly political program in Tigray TV and contributes a column to the privately owned Fete magazine on March the 27th, and this on allegations that he alarmed the public by spreading false information about the COVID-19 pandemic, according to media reports and CPJ research from the time. Now, this past Thursday, a court in Addis Ababa has ordered Yayeso to be released on bail, but police appealed the order and then accused him of violating anti-terror laws, according to news reports and the journalist's lawyer Tadele Gebre Medehin, who spoke to the CPJ via a messaging app. The Federal High Court ordered him to remain in custody until April the 20th, according to Tadele. Right, let's carry on now. The World Press Photo Foundation announced winners of its prestigious annual photojournalism the competition, recognizing World Press Photo of the Year, a World Press Photo Story of the Year, and also honoring the winners and runners-up in 8 separate categories. The highly coveted honor of the World Press Photo of the Year was given to the winner of the Global News category, a powerful photograph by Japanese photographer Yasuyoshi Chiba, chief photographer for East Africa at Agence France Presse. The photo, titled Straight Voice, shows a young man reciting protest poetry during a blackout in Sudan, his face illuminated by smartphone flashlights of the demonstrators surrounding him. And the World Press Photo of the Year was awarded to photographer Romain Lorandreau for his series Co, the Genesis of a Revolt, which also won the long-term projects category. The series of photographs captured the story of Algeria's youth and how they were able to spark the largest protest movement in Algeria in decades. All right, let's take a look now at some of the other winning pictures in the other categories. Okay, so well done to all the winners. You know, they say that a picture tells 1,000 words, so certainly some great photography there. And of course, that's Sudan's story, very powerful and powerfully captured indeed. Well, it's time now for our News Archives feature, and today we take you back to the 18th of April 2005, which marked 100 years since writer and composer of the national anthem Nkosi Sikelel' Africa, Enoch Sontonga, died. He wrote Nkosi Sikelel' Africa 8 years before his death at the age of 24. Here is how SABC News covered that story.
It's learnt from mother's knee, treasured, sung in happiness and sadness. Today, it reverberated through schools and churches in memory of its creator. Enoch Sontonga, the man who composed Nkosi Sikelel' Africa, died 100 years ago.
The voice of the nation. Once a cry for freedom, now a song of healing. The man who composed this song, Enoch Sontonga, was honored today. He wrote this hymn for his school choir. 100 years later, it's the anthem of several countries in Africa. Nkosi Sikelel' Africa became part of our anthem in 1994. Enoch Robert was named after his legendary great-great-grandfather.
It's really an honor for one. I don't know exactly why the family decided to name me after him, but I can tell you it's a very good feeling.
Today, schools sang the anthem and radio stations played it. Sontonga's grave was finally discovered at this Braamfontein cemetery in 1996. He was listed in the coloured registry as Enoch, died 1905, aged 32.
Enoch Sontonga, as a choir master and a musician, probably wrote many other songs in addition to Nkosi Sikelel' Africa. But this is the only one that we remember.
Enoch Sontonga died young, but he's left a legacy that united people of South Africa and the continent. Sandy McCowan, SABC, Johannesburg.
Yeah, very powerful, powerful song. Zimbabwe used that as their national anthem for a long time, and Zambia still uses it today as their national anthem, as does South Africa. So very powerful influence on the continent this powerful song has. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we go to East Africa and join our multimedia journalist there who'll take us through how COVID-19 has been covered in Uganda and also what's on the front pages of the newspapers today. Stay with us.
There will be a day when COVID-19 is a thing of the past.
Until then, our president has announced a national lockdown to save lives.
Unless you're an essential worker, stay at home. This is to protect you and others.
Stay at home, dulang haye, hlala ekhaya, play still.
Only leave home to seek medical care. Go to the bank.
Or to buy essential items like groceries or medicine.
You can still keep fit and healthy while at home.
But remember to take care of those who need it.
If you do need to leave home, keep your distance from other people and wash your hands regularly using soap or hand sanitizer.
Let's keep each other safe.
If you feel sick, go to your clinic, doctor or hospital. Or phone the NICD hotline on 0800 029 999.
We can beat this.
We can beat this.
Count me in.
Count me in.
Count me in.
This epidemic will pass, but it is up to us to determine how long it will last.
Welcome back. You're watching Media Monitor. Now we head to the East African country of Uganda as we bring you our regular international editor feature. And we're joined now via Skype by Benon Herbert Oluka, who's a multimedia journalist who is the Africa editor at a Global Investigative Journalism Network and also co-founder of the Watchdog Center for Investigative Journalism in Uganda. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, Benon. Jambo, habari yako?
Thank you for having me.
Great. All right, let's start with COVID-19 because this has touched every part of the globe, and I just wonder how journalists are doing in terms of covering that story in Uganda.
Uganda is on lockdown, so only the essential staff of every media house are allowed to go to their premises. The rest of the journalists have to work from home. That means a lot of journalists are stretched in trying to do the coverage. You find that the freelance journalists are barely able to do the work that they can because many of them don't have cars to move to where they're supposed to get the stories. And then, Uganda is probably the only country in the world that faces. Again, access to social media is quite difficult. So journalism is really facing a hard time at the moment.
All right, so is the story getting out? Are people being informed? I guess the online platforms become quite important, even though across the continent, print is still the mainstay of our news consumption.
The interesting thing I think about the journalists in countries that, where the governments have maintained a tight control of flow of information is that they already have conditions, they already have ways of managing to do the work despite restrictions. So we've already had a dry run on how to do some of these things, and so the journalists have, despite the conditions, they have had to continue working. The media houses have had to continue circulating the newspapers, even when there are several difficulties that they face. So, even under these conditions, the newspapers continue to come out, apart from one that had to stop circulation for a very short time, but they continue to produce the newspapers. But then there is also a transition toward online because that's the sort of faster, much easier way to do to share information at the moment. And I think the other thing is that right now you can't see a lot of investigative journalism. A lot of the information that media houses share is from official government sources. There is a very difficult, there are difficult conditions, so it's very hard to verify this information, to do your own digging for what is going wrong in some of these situations. The journalists are trying their best, but I don't think it's the best that can be done at the moment because so much is going on behind the scenes. But where the journalists have excelled is production of a lot of human interest stories. And I think the photojournalists have also had really a good run. They have produced fantastic, amazing pictures.
Yeah. So one of the themes I'm picking up here is a heavy hand in terms of what the authorities would like reported, and they're finding ways to manage this. Has this been Uganda over time, or is it just COVID-19?
The environment has always been difficult, but then COVID-19 sort of makes it difficult for the media to fight back or to reclaim some of the stuff that has been taken up. So, I mean, because the government, you cannot really, the restrictions in place cannot allow the media to act as independently as it would wish to. And so it makes it so difficult to do some of the things that you do to reclaim your turf. And so we are finding it, and then the information is also, access to information is so difficult at the moment. If the official sources don't give information, you cannot go to an office to find information. You cannot. Most of the people the sources that will give information are at home because they are not working just like everybody else, and so that makes it really difficult. I think it's also an opportunity for journalists to then begin looking for open source investigative tools and begin to use them as much as they should be doing at the moment.
All right, and then perhaps finally, have you been seeing journalists being harassed, arrested by authorities, seemingly or supposedly for breaking regulations around COVID-19?
There have been sporadic arrests every now and then. I think there has been a much greater respect for the media. It's because the government has designated the media as an essential service. So by and large, there has been a greater respect for the media than has been in place before. We've had several instances in the past where media covers protests and those kinds of other activities where the government does not want information to get out, and they, in those instances, would harass the media. But for the most part, this time around, they have respected the media. The main difficulty for the media has been access to information to do independent reporting.
All right, so Ben Herbert Oluka, we're going to have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thanks so much indeed for your insights from Uganda. Asante sana.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. So that's Ben Herbert Oluka, who's Africa editor at the Global Investigative Journalism Network, and also he works at something called the Watchdog in Uganda. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we bring it home. We take a quick look at the newspapers here in South Africa.
Hello Mzansi, and welcome back to Discam's Daily Care, your guide to everything you need to know around the coronavirus, also known as COVID-19. As you may well know, it's flu season in South Africa, and since the coronavirus does manifest itself with flu-like symptoms, it's important to know the difference between the two. Today, I have Dr. Musa Mtombeni, who's going to help us know the facts from the fiction. So, Doctor, first and foremost, how do you know if you have flu as opposed to the coronavirus?
So the flu and coronavirus are quite similar in terms of symptoms, but the important thing to remember about coronavirus is that it's a little bit more aggressive. So the symptoms you're looking out for here are a dry cough, a fever, as well as shortness of breath or difficulty breathing. Additionally to this, you may look out for a sore throat, headaches, and generalized body pains.
Fact or fiction? Can a flu or pneumonia vaccine actually protect you from getting the coronavirus?
So it is fiction that the flu vaccine is going to prevent people from being infected with the COVID-19. The idea behind the flu vaccine is to prevent co-infection, which means we don't want people to be infected with the flu virus and the COVID-19 at the same time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mbata, for clarifying the facts from the fiction. For those of you who need meds, remember we are open nationwide, and you can also use our app, the Pack My Meds app, to order your medication and pick it up in store. Remember, you too can send your questions that can be answered on Daily Care. All you have to do is go to our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. You're watching Media Monitor. We're starting to wrap things up now as we take a look at this morning's newspaper headlines. And joining us via Skype is Siyabonga Muta, who's the journalist at Voice of It. Siyabonga, thanks so much indeed for joining us. I hope you're staying safe, my brother.
I am safe. Thank you for having me, Peter. And I hope you are safe as well.
Yes, we are indeed. All right. So which publication grabbed your attention straight away today?
So I was looking at the City Press, where it was talking about councillors in different parts of the country that are accused of misusing this opportunity as a scoring goal to campaign in different local municipalities. So it's on the City Press. The first thing that really grabbed my attention was from the Northwest Province in the Ramutere Moloya local municipality in Zerast, where 2 ANC councillors are suspended following the allegations of using these food parcel contribution and asking local businesses to give them donations. And also there was an interesting one in Mpumalanga, where the EFF chairperson in the province, Colin Sadibe, laid criminal charges against a member of parliament, Janet Tabet, who is the SA Social Security Agency acting regional manager, Kidiboni Matebula, of seeing a truck that went straight to her home, delivering food parcels. So this part shows me that there's quite a lot of things that were just happening around the distribution of food parcels to different communities. I think in this one we have to look at political parties, particularly councillors, using this opportunity to have what you call votes for themselves or campaigning in the vulnerability of poor South Africans who need food.
Yeah, it is quite distressing, isn't it, that in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a crisis, that some people would manipulate badly needed assistance for own political gain. Is there another paper that you looked at today?
I also looked at the Sunday Times, where it talks about the Ombud locks down army action. So in this one, they're looking at the death of a Alexandra resident who was killed who was murdered rather by the military in his home in Alexandra during Good Friday. So now this one talks about the establishment of the ombudsman by the president in 2012, which is more like an IPID of the SA military. So in this one, they're looking at the complaints that were laid by the public, and also the conditions that military servants or military officers, when they lodge complaints to the military about things that they've seen. So it also it talks about the death of Mr. Khosa, who died during on Good Friday, and he will be represented by Advocate Tembegile Ngubaitu. But if you're looking at the story in overall, it talks about the distance sometimes between the understanding of the community on what the military is deployed to do, and also sometimes the military using its powers to do things that are not mandated by the president or the government. Because if you're looking into what the president said, is actually the quite opposite of what has been happening in Alexandra. So this story actually looks into that, and also it needs more justice.
All right, and then perhaps finally we'll stay with the Sunday Times, because I think the other thing that's fearful for me is the story of hunger. We see that children, particularly vulnerable, a lot of them, you'll remember, will be at school now, and for many of them, the meal that they get there is perhaps one of the main ones they have during the day. So this COVID-19 really making a lot of people vulnerable to hunger.
Yes, and where I live near 3 big hostels in the city of Johannesburg, which is GP, George Gok, and Denver. And there's quite a number of people who are unemployed there, and they're also in formal settlements, which has a number of young people, especially kids, between the ages of 7 to 15. Those obviously they cannot work, so they rely on their parents going to work every day to provide food or put bread on the table for them. So those are the ones who are really, really at risk now because they don't have food, and them not going to school, getting the lunch that they normally get, it brings more challenges to them, and also if you're looking at, as I said, that many people in the hostels are not working, there's a gap now of those who can afford and those who cannot afford, and you can see it now in these parts, especially in the formal settlements that I'm surrounded by.
All right, Siyabonga, we're going to have to leave it. Ngiyabonga, thanks so much indeed for joining us on the program, and we'll chat to you again in the near future.
Thank you so much, Peter, for having me.
Okay, so that's Siyabonga Muto, who's a journalist with Wits, Voice of Wits, and that's where we're going to leave Media Monitor for this week. Thanks so much indeed for tuning in. Join us again at the same time next week for more of the same. In the meantime, stay at home, wash your hands, stay safe. Bye-bye, everyone.